The Sustainable New Homes podcast, in partnership with Barratt David Wilson Homes, encouraging a more sustainable lifestyle. Stream the podcast now across all major platforms.
In this episode, I sit down with Emma Toovey, Ecology Director from Environment Bank, to discuss climate change ecology, biodiversity net gain, and how as a developer we strive to put our best foot forward to achieve a positive outcome and challenge our competitors to do the same. Emma, thank you for joining me. So for everyone, Emma is the Ecology Director of Environment Bank. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So kind of give us a bit of an overview of your role and who Environment Bank are and what they do.
Sure, no problem. So I'm Ecology Director at Environment Bank. And Environment Bank are an organisation that are essentially creating a network of sites across England to set their basically landscape scale nature reserves and restoring nature back into the English countryside. And the reason why we're doing that is to really help developers to have a solution for the upcoming new legislation, which is basically going to require all developers, like house builders, to deliver what's called Biodiversity Net Gain across the country.
Fantastic. So for those that wouldn't understand what Biodiversity Net Gain is,
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
It sounds like a very terribly scientific and
like,
slightly scary term, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's actually super simple. So basically, it's where a development needs to make sure that it delivers more nature than it's taking away as part of the scheme. Yes. So essentially, every developer will need to understand the impact on nature as part of the scheme and then put that nature back plus a little bit extra, and that's the gain bit.
Because I think that's what a lot of people, we kind of get referred to as big bad house builders, because they see this big open field and then we go and put houses on it. But actually, as Barratt as a minimum, achieve 10% of BioNet gain.
Yeah.
So obviously we implement landscaping schemes and stuff, but I can see from a consumer point of view, they're thinking, well, how? Because you've taken a field and you've put houses on it, so how are you achieving that?
Yeah.
I guess, can you explain as to how we could achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the key thing, first of all, is about measuring and really understanding sort of in a quantifiable way what that impact is. And so brilliantly, our government has designed what's called the DEFRA biodiversity metric. And that's what we understand what the value of the nature is at the beginning. And then it also helps developers understand what they need to put back. So that can be done in loads of ways. So on site, that could mean in some amazing recreational space that also has been designed specifically for wildlife. So it might be species flower-rich meadows or hedgerows, tree planting. But also there's an option to deliver some of it off-site as well. So they're in the balance. Some of the ecology will be as part of the development scheme, and residents in your new homes can benefit from access to nature and greener sites. And then some of it, which isn't necessarily always appropriate on site, that can also be off-site as well, maybe in the local area.
Yeah, it's finding that happy medium, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So wildlife can flourish, but also our customers can use the spaces. So we've got a development in Havant, which has got over 30 acres of green open space, and it's phenomenal.
Fantastic.
But it's making it, like I say, usable for our customer, but then also for wildlife. So like you say, we've got the wildflower meadows, got hedgehog highways.
Amazing. Excellent to hear.
And then we've actually got a segregated bird mitigation area for wintering birds.
Perfect.
So it's, like you say, it's finding that. But what can consumers do within their own gardens, which probably won't necessarily benefit the BioNet gain, but to help wildlife flourish? Got any insight onto that?
There's so much. I've literally just spent the weekend sorting out a new pond in my back garden.
Oh, amazing.
And I found a slow worm, which is, if anyone doesn't know, a slow worm is a lizard with no legs. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's a snake. But there's one in my back garden.
I didn't know that a slow worm was a lizard.
It is, there we go.
I thought it was a small snake.
It looks like a snake. Even my husband was like, there's a snake in the garden. But there's loads of wildlife gardening tips, and there's loads online if you want to get a bit more detail. But anything where there's water is great. So even a bird bath or a little puddle in the garden is brilliant for wildlife. If you can fit a pond in, even better.
Yeah.
And then it's all about planting. So something that's nectar rich, basically, that's good for bugs and bees. If it's good for bugs and bees, it's good for birds, it's good for everything else too.
Just has like a domino effect.
That's it. Thinking about what plants you put in that ideally, if they're sort of native and from England, from the UK, then that's going to be much better for wildlife than if you bring in something super exotic. But you can mix it all up. Like, there's no strict rules, but if you... trees are also always good, if you can fit a tree. And I know gardens are a luxury in some parts of England, but...
Yeah, and like you said, all of it can be sourced locally.
Absolutely.
So you don't need the exotic plants to help wildlife flourish, which is fantastic, because then you're obviously putting back into local communities as well, which is really nice.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what you guys can offer for BioNet Gain.
Yeah, so I guess so we're focused on that off-site option. So developers in England will do everything they possibly can to put some really amazing nature back into their development schemes. That's the right thing to do, and all residents in housing developments will benefit hugely from that. But the reality is that sometimes when you're fitting lots of houses in and you're losing some green space, then you have to look at off-site options too. So what we do, and this is where our network of these nature reserves comes in. So we're doing these landscape scale projects all over the country, and that delivers a really strong uplift in biodiversity, something really special, and we can measure that uplift. And where a developer isn't able to deliver what they can from a BNG on site, they can come to us and we essentially sell them that biodiversity off site to meet their planning requirements. So that they're called biodiversity units. So essentially off the shelf they can buy, packaged up, a nice amazing proportion of a nature reserve somewhere else.
And what kind of goes into that planning? Do you get local communities involved in what that unit looks like, or is it just a scheme that you guys design based off the metric, or how does that work?
So we work really closely. So in the main, we don't buy land, we work with landowners that are already in place. So we work really closely with rural communities and landowners to put on the ground what works locally, what's appropriate for that landscape. And we also consult with other stakeholders. So certainly the local authority, the local planning authority, we speak to them and their own ecologists and what they would like to see, and any other kind of organisations, local organisations specifically around nature. We try and tie into those wider objectives
Which is nice, because then there's a sense of community feel within that parcel, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so many of our sites have public access as well, so where possible they're really close to these development schemes but just not on site, and the wider community benefit from just accessing these amazing places.
Yeah, lovely. When a developer obviously uses an external unit to increase their BioNet gain, does it have to be within a certain proximity of the site?
Yeah, so this is all about this metric that I mentioned earlier. So there's certain sort of rules that incentivises a developer to deliver their biodiversity net gain as close to where the development scheme is as possible. So it can be delivered anywhere in England, but essentially if it's the further away it is, the developer gets slightly penalised because they have to deliver more the further away it is.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, we want it as close as possible. But
Exactly. So if it's in the local planning authority area, that's deemed local.
Yeah.
But if you go into the next local authority area or beyond, then essentially the developer needs to deliver more biodiversity as a result of that. What's different about biodiversity net gain? Because we've had loads of legislation and policy for decades, really, that's meant to be there to protect nature. But we've seen a huge decline, 60% decline in UK nature over the last 50 years. Yeah, and that's with all of the brilliant stuff.
That feels like a
huge.
rapid decline.
We're one of the most deprived countries in the world in terms of nature. We've had the greatest decline over the last 50 years. So biodiversity net gain, the sort of premise behind it is that it obviously stops that decline.
Yeah.
Helps you, but it puts something back too. So we're trying to recover, we're trying to get back to where we used to be. So it feels like it's a really transformational. I'm an ecologist, obviously, I'm excited about it, but it is a transformational time, I think, for biodiversity. We've got this opportunity now to do something, and the key is that we do it properly and we do it well, because it's an existential crisis for us. It's linked to climate change.
Yeah.
It's really key that it works. So, so if there are any of your audience are worried that I might run off to Barbados, you don't need to worry, because it's the first time really where it's really strong regulation is coming into place, which will mean that there's sufficient scrutiny on biodiversity net gain and that it's going to actually happen.
Yeah.
But also the land where it happens has to be bound for at least 30 years, a minimum of 30 years. So that land can't be used for any other purpose. We can't come around in 3 years' time and put houses on it. So that's really crucial, I think. It gets reassuring.
It gives that longevity then, doesn't it?
Absolutely, that it's going to be actually impactful.
And are you getting the commitment and buy-in from developers? I mean, I know we started to implement at least a minimum of 10% since March 2020.
Brilliant.
But I don't know where our competitors sit. So are you getting that investment and buy-in from other developers?
So as we're moving towards November, which is when the mandatory sort of deadline hits, the interest is increasing hugely, and I think there's this new realisation that this is here to stay, and actually it has to be part and parcel of the bigger picture, and developers need to be thinking about it really early on in their feasibility studies, and thinking about, okay, how am I going to get biodiversity into my scheme, instead of it being a kind of add-on at the end. So lots of developers are coming to us now.
It needs to be a change in approach really, and their mindset almost just needs to flip now, doesn't it?
Totally.
Should almost be a priority. I mean, I know for Barratt's it is, but it should be for everyone.
Absolutely, and it will be more cost effective. It won't impact your program. There's loads of brilliant reasons the quality of your developments will be better if you think about it super early in the process.
It's just a shame that people are almost now reactive because the deadline's coming. They haven't prioritised it. But
there's definitely
a bit of a moan.
You that are flagging, but others are well ahead of the game, like yourself. So that's brilliant.
I was just thinking, have you seen developers kind of do it above and beyond what's expected of them as part of the planning condition?
Certainly. I mean, we're starting to see, some local authorities are pushing beyond this 10%.
Nice.
But some organisations, particularly large house builders and other large infrastructure projects, they're pushing beyond that 10% too, and just really thinking about that bigger picture, that decline that I was talking about. They've got the opportunity to really contribute to putting things back.
So have we started to see a slight increase, or are we just completely way off and we're not there yet?
I think we're a little way off, and it's not all the fault of developers at all. Of course, there's a whole range of reasons why that declines happen, but I think we're on the cusp of seeing things change, and it's not just BNG as well, so there's lots of other government initiatives and subsidies and new schemes coming through that are going to encourage landowners to put more back, restore nature, and work a bit more in harmony, shall we say, with the environment.
Because similar to developers, obviously you've got landowners that may own a piece of land but not actually farm it or do anything with it, and it might just sit there, which technically isn't benefiting wildlife either.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It depends what's happening on the land, but certainly if it's managed for wildlife, you get so much more from it, and not just for biodiversity. So there's loads of water quality benefits, benefits for air quality, flood management, lots of those sort of wider ecosystem services that all benefit from more nature in our environment.
Yeah, and like you say, I guess it's just having that accessibility to that information, so people and the consumers can understand what they can do or what they need to do to get it into that best possible place it can be.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, the wider public are becoming more aware of the need for nature and actually demanding it. I mean, you must have that for your housing.
And rightly so.
Yeah.
I know I could speak on behalf of Barratt, but it should be a priority. It is a priority for us, so it should be for everyone.
Yeah.
It also, selfishly, it makes the development more sellable.
Totally.
Because people have got that, especially with COVID, when everyone felt locked in, and especially when in apartments and in London they felt like they couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
They crave that open space, so
Absolutely.
it seems silly that people aren't prioritising it sooner. So tell me then, how did you get into ecology?
Well, I don't come from an ecology family. I didn't live in anywhere rural. I grew up in urban Reading, and and it was kind of an unusual career path, I think, for anyone from where I grew up. But I think it was doing biology at school, going on the geography field trips and getting out into nature. My grandparents lived in Cornwall. I just loved getting out and about. I really wanted to kind of run around the fields in my wellies and get exploring and roaming through rock pools, and I just had this kind of innate passion for the environment. So when I did a biology degree for my first degree, but as part of that I just explored what can I do with this, like where can I go, what kind of jobs could I do that involve me getting out on my wellies, basically.
That was the aim. Wellies must be
warm.
And
then I went to the library, literally sat down and was like, oh, there's a job, an ecologist, a consultant ecologist. So that's what I aimed for, and I ended up doing a master's basically to help me get into this career path, and that's all I've ever done. So yeah, I've essentially been a consultant. Before I worked for Environment Bank, a consultant working for developers like yourself, helping them design schemes and think about the ecology that's on their sites.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my background.
you still get to wear wellies now?
I do, not as much as I'd like. But my team, they're all out there, out and about today. The sun's shining and it's a perfect day to get out there.
So I guess a big worry for our consumers that it won't be finished, or it'll be untidy, it'll be unkept. How is it maintained?
Yeah.
Give a little bit more insight into how. I'm assuming there's got to be a commitment there. They have to.
Absolutely, yeah. So Biodiversity Net Gain, whether it's on-site or off-site, has to be committed to legally. So it's like bound up in law for at least 30 years. And as part of that commitment, there needs to demonstrate the funding and the management mechanisms for that. So basically, you couldn't put in a small woodland on your site and then just abandon it. You'll need to have what's called a management plan that's approved by the local authority. You'd have to do that before you can even get consent or to discharge a planning condition. And that will include a series of activities to make sure that that habitat is essentially managed for that long-term period, and that it's going to be, what's been promised will be delivered on the ground. And then the kind of financial funding that sits behind that needs to be demonstrated. It doesn't necessarily all need to be in the bank, but the mechanism for that money to come through.
Yeah, so we all use things like a management company and we'll have them in place. So surely they have to sign up as part of the legal agreement that they will honour it and they will maintain it to the standard that it needs to be kept.
That's right, or at least someone will need to take ownership of that responsibility. That's right, yeah. And for the off-site side, that's us. That's what we do.
So you maintain it and...
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So we make that commitment. We sign up to what's called the Section 106 agreement, which is a planning agreement. Getting too technical now. But yeah, we're legally bound to look after that land. So also the landowner doesn't have to take the risk. We do as Environment Bank. So, and we go in and we monitor, we do surveys. I have a big team of amazing ecologists who get out there. They look at the flowers and they look at the trees and they check everything's on track. And if it's not on track, we have to step in and do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talk about the management company monitoring and maintaining those spaces.
Yeah.
How do they check and ensure that they are where they need to be? Are there set guidelines and...
Yeah, so basically as part of that kind of commitment that's legally bound, whoever's delivering that biodiversity net gain, whether it's us or your management company, they'll have to essentially agree a monitoring programme over the 30 years, which will mean that they have to go out and survey and make sure everything's on track, but then actually report back transparently about the status of everything that's on the ground. So that would be reporting back to the local authority, but there's also what's called a gain site register being set up at a national level, which Natural England essentially run, who are our statutory body for nature in England. And that will all be uploaded on there. So anyone in the community can log into that, see what commitments have been made, and they can also access publicly available reports from the local that have been delivered to the local authority that show that everything's on track or isn't indeed. And if it isn't,
and needs to be rectified.
That needs to be rectified, absolutely.
Fab. So it's all accessible to the consumer, which is amazing. It's how it should be.
Absolutely. And it's like another pair of eyes as well, just making sure like the local authority will have an obligation and a duty to keep an eye, essentially a watchdog on what's happening, but having access by the public too. It helps to make sure everyone's, you know, doing what they promised.
Yeah. Fab. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Emma. It's been great fun.
It's been a pleasure to come. Thank you.
We hope you're enjoying this series. If you don't want to miss another episode, click subscribe.